Hi guys, Rhi here from mummyof4.com and welcome back to the Real Talk with Rhi podcast. How are we doing? So a couple of weeks ago, at age 40, I was diagnosed with ADHD. And it wasn't till a couple of years ago that it even occurred to me I may have ADHD. I never thought all through growing up that it could have been a thing. Literally until a couple of years ago, it was not on my radar. My understanding of ADHD was just, I guess, very busy, very hyperactive children. You stereotypically think of very busy, very, very active little boys who are literally bouncing off the wall. And that was my understanding of it. And then a couple of years ago, I learnt that it can present very differently to that, and there are lots of different ways in which it can present. And I talked about this in previous podcast episodes and a number of videos on my YouTube channel, and I will link those videos and those podcast episodes below, and there will be a blog post to go with this, with links to everything that I'm talking about in it, so you can go back and kind of go over the history of how I've got to where I am now. But in today's episode, I really wanted to chat about some really sort of random things, I guess, some random things that I do now, some things that I've done all my life that I'm just kind of now, some over the last couple of years and some over the last few weeks, I'm realizing these are not just me things. They're not everybody things either. They are perhaps ADHD things, and these little parts of my personality, these little things I do, habits, behaviors that are probably because of my ADHD. So I'm going to share these with you today. I do want to kind of preface this by saying this isn't medical advice, just disclaimer. I'm not a doctor. I'm just going on my own experience. I'm sharing my experience with you, and if it helps you in some way, then great. But obviously, if you have any concerns, please see your own medical health practitioner, your GP, whoever it might be. So a few random things. These are in no particular order. Some of them are things I've struggled with, and some of them are more like elements of my personality or character that are helpful, kind of like superpowers, I guess. So, like I say, in no particular order. Side quests turn out, I thought everyone kind of did this. I thought this was mum life. So bear in mind, I have been a mother for coming up to 20 years. Oh, good grief. Yeah, my eldest is 19. So many of these things I have put down to baby brain and then mum life and being busy. So many of these things. Because it's almost like I can't remember a time before that where I was just me before I was a mother. So it's hard to remember almost what I was like before I was a mum, because who can remember that far back? But side quests. Now for me, this looks like I'm in the middle of doing something and something pops into my head and I'm like, oh, this thing that I need to do. And often it's kind of like a mum life admin thing, like, oh, I need to pay for that trip, or pay for school dinners, or order that pair of leggings for the girls because they went the hole in the knee with the others, or just, like mum life admin-y tasks, and they pop into my head. And because I've got this kind of brain that actually, it turns out this is probably ADHD as well, it's almost like when a thought pops into my head, the thoughts don't get filed neatly. They're almost like thoughts kind of breezing in. They kind of came in on the wind. And I feel like if I don't capture that thought and act on it and pin it down, it might just blow away and then I won't be able to find it again. That's how it kind of feels in my head. So when these thoughts pop into my head, these things that turn into side quests, I'm like, oh, I need to go and do this now before I forget. And this can look like, oh, I need to take this cup to the kitchen, and then I get to the kitchen and I'm like, oh yeah, I just need to put this stuff away that was delivered from Sainsbury's. And then, so I'll open the kitchen cupboard and start putting some stuff away, but then there'll be rubbish in my hand that I need to take out the back door. And then I'm just like, I end up back at my desk going, what was I doing again? And then I walk into the kitchen and the cupboard's open because I'm halfway through doing that. And it's like one thing leads to another. And if I don't really put thought to it, I don't end up finishing the thing I'm doing because I go off on these little side quests. So I've done other things, like the stuff needed putting away, the bottle needed to go to the kitchen, the stuff needed to go out the rubbish. All of it needed to happen, not in that moment. And really what I needed to do in that moment was finish what I should have been doing. And these little side quests have been a thing in my life. And I honestly was just like, I'm so ditzy, mum brain, baby brain. And I thought it was just that. Turns out that's probably just because of my ADHD. So that's interesting. Now, one of my planners, if you don't know, I have a planner store. The main reason I developed my planners was to help with what I thought was kind of mum life struggles. Turns out it's probably just to help out with my ADHD. But I'm sure a lot of other mums do have similar issues with, a lot on your cognitive load. But basically, I developed a planner. If you're watching the YouTube version of this, you can see this. If you're listening in your podcast, audio only providers, then apologies, you're going to have to use your imagination. But the link to the planner store will be down in the description. But basically, there is a section in my 2-page a day planner, which is the Organised Life and Gratitude Planner, for notes. This is where I force myself to brain dump things. So there are 2 sections I actually brain dump things. There's a physical to-do today list, which is a to-do list, as in if it is something like pay for school trip, then that goes on the to-do list. And then I know that thought is captured. It's not going to fly out of my brain. And what I have to do with all of my might is force myself. So say I'm editing a video or I'm editing this podcast, I'm at the computer, and then I'm like, oh my goodness, I've got to go and find a torch to pack for Bella's school trip. That's something I know I have to do. What I want to go and do is go and find that torch right now, but what I have to force myself to do is to take my pen and write it down in the to-do section of my planner. Now, the notes section, the kind of brain dump section, is more for when I'm like, oh, I've just had this really great idea how I can redesign my website, or for a podcast episode, or a new planner I can launch. And it's just like ideas. And again, I feel like these ideas, if I don't pin them down, will just float off into space. They'll just be like, whoop, and they're gone. And then later on, I'll be going, oh, I had that really good idea, but I can't think for the life of me what it was. So annoying. And then I get really frustrated with myself and I end up not being kind to myself and my own thoughts. So I force myself then to write these brilliant ideas down in my planner. And sure, you can use any system you want. You can use bits of paper, you can use different notebooks. But what I was finding was when it wasn't all in one centralized place, I had some notes on bits of paper, some notes on my phone, some notes in all these different places. And it wasn't just one cohesive place to brain dump into. So by having it in my planner, I've got something I can physically flick through at the end of the week and go through and be like, oh yeah, that idea I had that I was a very good girl and wrote down in my planner and didn't just go off in action immediately and actually finish what I was doing. Big pat on the back for me. But then I can put that in next week's to-do list and next week's plans to actually action that. So yeah, side quests, especially when I'm doing boring tasks, which we're going to get onto in a second. Boring tasks are far more likely to result in me going on a little side quest, because when I'm really interested in something, then I do go into this hyper-focused state, which again, I didn't realize, but apparently that's an ADHD thing. So hyper-focus is literally the absolute opposite of what I used to traditionally think as ADHD. So I used to traditionally think of ADHD before I understood it properly as just bouncing off the walls, not be able to keep the thoughts in your head, which I guess I don't see myself with bouncing off the walls but the forgetfulness and, okay, with hindsight, maybe I should have seen that all along. But the hyper-focus element is when it's like the rest of the world can fall away. So I've been like this when I get very excited about new projects. So when I got very excited initially about starting my blog and everything, I found so much time to focus on it because I was excited about getting it started. And ultimately, this someone else pointed out, this is a really ADHD thing as well. I can go between one or two ways, between overthinking and procrastinating something basically forever, or doing something now. And I think I struggle with finding that balance in the middle. So the reason I lean into going, I think what did I say in a previous episode, that when I started my channels, I'm aware, like I don't love the names of any of my channels. So I've got Mummy of 4 UK, which the theory behind that is like, well, if people know I've got 4 children, they know I'm going to be talking about mum life and organisation and things, because that's what I've got to deal with. So I figured that kind of explained it. And it was very much slap a name on it and get started, because I was worried that I would otherwise procrastinate forever. And then Mummy of 4 does Disney. I was like, well, people will know it's me, so maybe there'll be that name recognition. They'll know what it's about. Really not a perfect name, but slap a name on it and get started. You know, it's not terribly creative, but done is better than best. And I knew that it was either do it now while I'm excited about it, or procrastinate it forever. Real Talk with Rhi podcast. Well, I guess, yeah, I didn't love the name on that either. It was adequate. It was adequate. And I thought about rebranding a few times, all of it, but I thought, well, then people are going to know who I am. It's just, there are other things I can put my focus on. So going back, because I digress, which I have a tendency to do, then this hyper-focus would come in at this beginning stage when I'm really excited about a new project. And I get like that when I'm excited about new videos. I get like that when I'm excited about like new cameras and stuff. I'm a little bit of a tech geek, but when I know there was a new camera coming out, I put a video on my main channel about which cameras I use, and if you watch that, you'll know that I'm probably a little bit of a tech geek when it comes to cameras, phones, like iPhones and iPads and all that kind of stuff. And when I have like a new gadget, I guess it's gadgets, I like gadgets, then I will know everything about it and how it works, and I get excited and enthused again about making content. And then I like get into that hyper focus about getting enthused about, you know, making new videos. And that when you're in that hyper focus, the best way to describe it is like time seems to expand a little bit, and you could just, it goes from like that feeling, if you've ever been in a job where you're just like clock watching, waiting for 5 o'clock, it's like the absolute opposite of that, where you're just so excited and enthused, you forget to eat and drink and go to the toilet, you know? And that is such a huge contrast from how I am when I'm doing the boring elements of my job. So the exciting elements of my job are when I really hit on an idea that I think, oh, this is really going to help people, or this is going to be so much fun, or so I got really, you know, I love doing like the Disney trips and things, and then when I get comments and things saying how much the videos have helped people, then I get just really excited and enthused about that. Or when I get really excited about a topic I'm going to be really enthusiastic about talking about here on the podcast or over on my main channel, and I really want to make that video and it's all really exciting. That bit I can hyper focus on really easily. The bit I struggle with, the bit where I'm likely to be wanting to go off doing a side quest, and it's not like just randomly scrolling my phone, it's stuff that I legitimize to myself is required and important. But when I'm in that hyper-focused state, I wouldn't dream of wanting to go off and do these little side quests. I just wouldn't enter my mind because I'm so tunnel vision. However, when I get to the end bit, so if you imagine just a little tiny bit behind the scenes here. So like at the moment I'm filming this podcast episode, I've got my microphone, I've got my camera, and I'm talking to you guys. So after that, I would put the SD card into the computer, I'd do all the editing and stuff. And then by the time I've got to the end of all the editing, there's a lot less editing on the podcast, you can probably tell, but certainly on the videos. By the time I finished editing a video, it's like my energy levels have depleted and my focus is kind of gone because I've used it all up on that creative bit. And then when it comes to the bits that I find more boring or I struggle with more, so for example, thumbnail design, you know, the little pictures you get on YouTube that you could click on. I have always had this like block in my head that I'm no good at art and creative design. So I'm like, oh, thumbnail design. And I know it's important because thumbnail design's like book cover. And if it's a rubbish book cover, no one's going to read the book because people judge a book by its cover. But I find that bit more tedious. Like I feel like I'm no good at it. So I'm like, ugh. And the bit I find really hard is then proofreading. You will probably have seen typos in the description of some of my videos, or in the blog post to go with the video, or maybe an email I send out. And it's like I can't see my own mistakes. Now, it's not because I can't spell or read. I don't think I'm dyslexic. The best way I can describe it to you, it's like my bandwidth by the time I get to that stage for detail has dropped to almost nothing. It's like I've taken my glasses off and I need them to see properly. And I'm like, oh, and I'm out of energy and I can't read what I've written. I read what I think I've written. Now, if I was to go back to that in a month's time, and therefore I can't remember what I've written, and I'm reading as if I'm reading someone else's words, I would see the mistakes in that. Just as if there was a typo with a random letter in the middle of a word and I was reading it in someone else's work, I would likely see that. I would likely see that very, very quickly. But it's like I can't see my own mistakes. I can't see my own spelling mistakes. I can't see my own typos. It's like I'm blind to them. And apparently that seems to be a bit of an ADHD thing, like blind to certain details, and the detail stuff that doesn't feel as important or exciting or interesting, which obviously can be a little problematic in life, because if you're reading long contracts or something, you need to know the details of what you're signing. But stuff like that, it's like it's real struggle for my brain to have to focus on it, whereas other things my brain like latches onto like a magnet and doesn't struggle to focus on at all. And yeah, apparently that is an ADHD thing. By the way, as we're going through these, do let me know if you resonate with any of these. And like I said, just because you resonate with none of them doesn't mean you don't have ADHD. If you resonate with all of them, it doesn't mean you do have ADHD. Just out of curiosity, just purely for the purpose of community chat and just kind of learning more from each other. I would love to know which of these kind of resonate with you. Another one is difficulties with getting tasks in order. So I have to have a printed out sheet with checklists for all of my videos. Now I know ultimately I have to film it, I have to put the stuff in the computer, I have to edit it, and I have to do the post-upload work. But like I said, because I find the post-upload work so boring and it's not the creative bit, and ultimately it's the bit that I guess I could get someone else to do. I don't actually need to do it myself. I could pay someone to do that bit. But because that bit just is so boring to me, then I find that I struggle to get the tasks in order of which things I should do. It should be like falling off a log, kind of easy, because I do it all the time. I've been putting out 3 videos a week since 2019. So I've made a lot of videos. I made hundreds of videos, and this stuff should come so naturally, but still every time I have to go through a checklist to make sure I've done it all and in the right order. Otherwise I miss steps. And the times I don't follow a checklist, I guaranteed miss steps, which seems mad. I look back and I get really cross with myself because I've missed steps. But the other thing I do is I've actually got, behind my camera right now, I'm looking up at them, I've got clipboards. This is a system I've had to put in place because I struggle to get things in order. I've got clipboards for each project, so each video, podcast episode, whatever. And I have to put on them the date I'm filming them and the date they're due. And I have to put them in order of what I'm supposed to do. And I have to sit and do that. I sort of go through it a couple of times a week. And I've also got like an Eisenhower matrix in my planner. Eisenhower matrix, so named after President Eisenhower, apparently, who invented it, which has got important and not important at the top. You're going to have to imagine this again if you're listening, not watching, but important and not urgent at the top, and then urgent and not urgent down the side. I will put a link to everything I'm talking about, like I say, below if you want to have a look. But basically, I can't just look at a to-do list and naturally know what needs to come first. My brain will ultimately want me to pick off the really easy wins and leave the bigger, meatier things that I don't want to do or tackle till last or never. So if I don't have this clipboard system, if I don't use an Eisenhower matrix, I could so easily sit at my desk and waste an hour or more wondering what I should be doing. I could easily do that. So without these systems in place, and it turns out I've been putting these productivity and organization systems in place for years. I've been almost like a productivity junkie. I have been trying to become more organized because I just identified as not a very organized person since, well, I think it was highlighted to me how disorganized I felt when I became a mother. And then I realized when we were about to have baby number 2 that, wow, if I don't get my stuff together right now, I'm in trouble. And with every baby, I really felt like I had to level up because my responsibilities were about to increase. And if I didn't really level up at that stage, I was just going to get myself into a right pickle. So I've been working hard on learning more productivity methods, trying things, implementing different things, seeing what works for me to try and hack mum life for many years. Turns out it looks like, although a lot of these things are mum life issues, I've been trying to hack ADHD this whole time, this whole time. But yeah, I really struggle with getting tasks in order. And that sounds really silly. It's like, why don't you know what to do first? Well, that is something I struggle with. And apparently that is very ADHD trait. Another one which is handy in my line of work is I am very talkative. I was referred to as a chatterbox as a child, and that obviously is quite helpful with what I do. It's weird though, because since the pandemic, and I never identified as introverted before, and people that only know me through here might be like, what? But ultimately I am just talking to myself right now. You guys are here watching me, we're together really, but I am only talking to a camera. But even talking to a cat, if I've had a full day of doing a lot of filming, it really drains me and takes it out of me. And the reason I bring up the pandemic is because I didn't struggle as much as some people did with lack of socializing. I actually found it easier in some ways because there was already so much to juggle, and having to, I guess when I started, going back into society, and when we all re-entered society, that first time I went on a mum's night out, for example, I was like, oh, anxious. Oh. And I think I am more introverted than I come across. I think I can put on a really good show of not being introverted, and I think I can fake it till you make it, I guess. And I suppose it's called an introverted extrovert, but ultimately doing it for long periods of time drains me, which apparently is associated with ADHD as well, and can sort of the effort of socializing and being on can feel quite draining to people with ADHD, apparently. Who'd have known? Another really random one, this is so random, which I've only learnt recently that it is associated with ADHD, is noticing patterns in things. So for me, this looks like I am always guessing what's going to happen at the end of TV shows, and I'm usually right, or books or films. And it drives my husband nuts because he's like, how did you know that? And I'm like, well, it seemed really obvious because... So I'm just looking for it's pattern recognition apparently, which can be really helpful in some lines of work, and noticing where things lead to just do this pattern recognition. So for me, if I'm watching a TV show, I'm trying to analyze, right, what is the writer saying in this moment that they're setting up for plot points later on. Which is why it really drives me nuts when things don't have any rhyme or reason. So we watched a show. What on earth was it called? It was a really random show on Netflix that everyone was on about. Oh, it's going to drive me nuts. Right, I'm going to have to look this up now. I'm going to have to look this up on it. It was on Netflix. While I'm looking for this, see if anyone can guess what it is before I actually get there. It was on Netflix, and it was about the dad, like the son, like the 20-odd-year-old son, was getting married. He was getting married, and the fiance and the dad were hooking up. And it drove me absolutely insane, that show. It drove me insane because I was like, where's the reasoning? Where's the logic? They didn't set this up as if the motivation was right for the characters. There was no pattern recognition in it. I couldn't predict it at all. And the reason it annoyed me, I just cannot find it. Can anyone know what I'm on about? It was on Netflix, and it was quite shocking. It's quite shocking. Like really shocking at the end. It might have been a book as well. Oh my goodness. I'm actually going nuts now, not being able to know what it was. Found it. Obsession. It's called Obsession on Netflix. It was an 18. It was very rude, very graphic. And I watched it because every man and his dog was talking about it. And I kept watching it going, this is going to make sense soon. Everyone's been on and on and on about this for ages. And it just continued to be like one thing after another of, but that doesn't make sense. The character motivation doesn't make sense. So my point in this is, other than go and watch Obsession if you would like to waste several hours of your life to see what I mean, or chime in the comments if you saw it and you felt the same. But I just felt that the pattern didn't make sense. They did not set up the characters with the correct motivation to make sense of what happened in the plot. Whereas mostly you can kind of see little glimmers of things that the writers will have put in order to make sense of what then happens, little hints, little Easter eggs, little things that set up the plot. Anyway, while we're sitting watching TV, I can normally be going, oh, I think that she's going to be the one that does so-and-so, or I think that he's clearly the one that did the crime or whatever. And my husband's like, how do you know that? And I'm usually right. But apparently this is a very common ADHD trait in pattern recognition. So this can be really helpful, I guess, if you're in certain jobs, like if you're a therapist, for example, and you can very quickly pick up patterns in how your clients are behaving, things they say, and then you can draw conclusions from that. That's going to be really, really, really helpful. Perhaps if you're working in the stock market or something, that might be really, really helpful. But let me know if you are one of those people that can predict patterns and things like I can. Also related to television, another thing that I didn't realize was ADHD related was I just actually really struggle to sit still and watch TV without also doing something else. So this is why I'm also very likely to be snacking or drinking something while watching TV, or having to Google or use the IMDb app. I use the IMDb app a lot, going, who were they? What were they in now? Oh, rather than just being able to just sit and watch it, because my brain's like, and it just struggles to just do that one thing of sit, relax and watch television without being like, oh, I'm just going to go and get my lip balm. I'm just going to go and get this, just going to go and do a little job, just side quest, I guess, while I'm watching TV. And one of the ways I can make myself sit and watch TV is snacking and having a glass of wine, but that's not a terribly helpful or healthy coping mechanism. So I try not to do that too much, because otherwise, I'm just literally doing that in order to make myself sit still. And then, like I say, it's not super helpful. And then I end up, having wine and then in the morning regretting my life choices. So I do try and limit that to the weekends only. But yeah, total inability to just sit and watch TV. Another one is total inability to quiet my mind. So if I think of like doing yoga, I try and do yoga, but I find it such a challenge unless I'm also listening to an audiobook, watching something. Just kind of being still with my thoughts, I find a real challenge. Sometimes, and even if I'm like doing yoga, but then I have like ideas and things, because things come to me. People refer to them as divine downloads, just like ideas. I get great ideas in the shower, I guess because I'm being quiet with my thoughts. But if I'm doing yoga, I have to have my planner and a pen near me for when great ideas ultimately pop into my head, or things I remember I'm supposed to be doing. So maybe doing yoga is similar for me to doing that kind of mindless or mind numbing, perhaps for me, work on the computer, in that I'm struggling to focus on it because I'm bored, and then other ideas pop into my head. And it's funny because everyone finds different things boring. So someone else with ADHD may really struggle with, writing, but love like maths and accounts and really get hyper focused on that. For me, dealing with my accounts is like, oh, I just want to scratch out my own eyes. I'm like, oh, please no, anything but that. The best thing I ever did was get a good accountant to look after that for me, because I find it so difficult to focus and pay attention to making sure I'm getting things right, that I'm convinced I'm going to get it all wrong and be accused of like tax fraud or something, because I've just been totally unable to pay attention enough to doing my taxes properly. So it just feels like such a weight lifted off for me to have my accountant sort all that out, so that I know, because I am borderline incapable of doing that properly, because I find it so hard to focus on, because I find it just mind boggling, that I know that I have got a professional doing it properly. But then I guess other people might, maybe video editing is a better example. That's something that I do find more enjoyable. But maybe my accountant would be like, oh, no, I wouldn't, like, I'd rather do anything other than that. So yeah, that's another one. I also have a total inability to follow directions, like road directions, to the point where I hear you go down the road, you take a right, and then you blah, 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 blah. And my husband tries to give me directions sometimes to, I don't know, so I've got to take the children to a birthday party in some random place that's like only 20 minutes, half an hour away from where we live, but I haven't been there before or for many years or whatever. And he'll be like, right, you just go da 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 da. And I'm like, how long? How long have you known me? Like, I love you, but I'm not listening to you because I'm just hearing blah, 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 blah. I zoned right out. So even going to places in my hometown, it's going to seem really embarrassing now, I'm going to fast up to this, I put the sat nav on. If it is not somewhere that I drive to on a weekly basis, which there are not many places I go to on a weekly basis, but if it's not somewhere that I go to that is so blinking obvious that it's basically a straight road to there, I'll use the sat nav, because otherwise my brain, which struggles with direction, it's like some people's brains, the way I understand it from other people I've spoken to, can visualize the exact route. They can visualize where they're going. They can visualize the whole thing. Whereas if you said to me, Rhi, here's a large sum of money, please give me accurate directions from point A to point B in your hometown, the chances of me actually winning that money are pretty slim, even if I try quite hard, because it's like I'm trying to visualize it, but parts of the picture are foggy and blurred out. And when I'm actually driving somewhere, largely when I get there, I can see the pieces again and I can maybe see the next step. But as someone's trying to give me directions, or if I'm trying to give directions, it's like parts of the picture are blurred out and I just can't see them. So apparently that can be an ADHD thing as well. Totally random one now that you're not going to be able to see if you're watching, if you're listening rather on the audio version, but if you're watching on the video version, so you can go and see the video version if you want to see what I mean. But my thumbs, apologies if anyone else finds this grim, my thumbs are double jointed. Apparently there is a large correlation of ADHD and hypermobility. I didn't realize I was hypermobile. I didn't realize double jointed thumbs were a sign of hypermobility, and I didn't realize that I am more mobile in my kind of legs and hips than most people. I thought it was just like a hangover from dancing, which I haven't done properly for many years, but I am more bendy then than your average human, in the kind of like yoga-y ability to do the split sort of way. My physio told me I was hypermobile a few years ago and I didn't even realise. It's why then I suffered so badly with the SPD thing, the pelvis splitting issue when you're pregnant, and I had so much pain. But apparently there's a really high correlation of hypermobility and ADHD, which I only just figured out. Another thing that I only recently realised is there's a very high correlation of dancers and ADHD, which actually makes a lot of sense. So a lot of people I used to dance with have recently been diagnosed with ADHD, but running for me, for example, is just, I find it so boring. I know some people love running and I've tried so hard to love running. I've tried so hard and it turns out I just hate it. But I think it's just perhaps the repetitive nature and then either bored or alone with thoughts, racing mind, whatever. It just doesn't do it for me. Swimming's the same. It's just not for me. It's something that I'm bored of in 2 minutes. Whereas dancing, when you've got complicated choreography and you've got the music, there's so much to think about. It pushes the thoughts of other things out of your head until you know the choreography so well that it becomes like motor memory. So while you are trying to remember and pick up choreography, it really occupies your whole brain and it's a real challenge. And then once you've learnt the choreography, I can still remember all choreography from dances that I did, when I was between 10 and 16. I'm 40 now, and I can still remember all the choreography to those. It's like once they got put into my motor memory, then they're there for good. And when I got to that stage, I can then think about other things while doing them. But I think picking up choreography when you've got ADHD is just a good way of quietening your brain. It's like it forces everything else out because that is so much to concentrate on. And maybe that's why I enjoyed dancing so much. I had another point to talk about with dancing. What on earth was that? See, that slipped out of my head then. It just slipped in there like a little thought on the wind. It blew in and now, whew, it's gone. Oh well. I'm sure it'll come back. I hope it'll come back to me. Anyway, I've got many, many more of these to get through, but it turns out that this episode is dragging on quite some time. So you're going to have to tune in again to a future episode of Real Talk with Rhi for part 2 of things that I do or that are part of me that I had no idea were to do with ADHD, and it turns out they are. So thanks so much for tuning in. Don't forget to like, subscribe and click on the next video and check out my Patreon if you're on YouTube. Rate and review if you're listening, and I shall see you in the next one. Bye.